Thank you for being here. Today, we're going to explore something that a lot of us struggle with most of the time. Um, we look at what it really is, what it really means. We'll try to understand different aspects, how it impacts different aspects of our lives. And most importantly, how do we break from this? How do we break from this mindset that often creates a mental barrier for us, preventing us from moving forward in life, especially when we set a certain goal with respect to weight loss in particular. And that's nothing but what you see on your screen. It's perfectionism, right? Um, so, a quick introduction. I am Nihit. I am a psychologist. I work in the area of coaching and health. Lately, I've been working with biofeedback. I'm really passionate about health and wellness, helping people move where from stuckness and self-criticism towards more towards growth and progress, where they're and of course helping them be more compassionate with themselves. So that's a little about me. I've been associated with LeanDreams for the last since the very beginning. So yeah, that's me. Hi, and okay, so before we get into understanding what perfectionism really is, I want you to maybe think about, um, or in fact, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when I say what perfect? When you hear the word perfectionist. Hmm. Um, like for many of us, it could be somebody who um, holds themselves in really high standards. Um, but yeah, what does it look like for you if I ask you what do you think about it, or in general, what is your opinion about somebody who's a perfectionist?
Mm.
Probably someone that is trying to make everything fit the way they want it to,
Mm.
and probably not realizing that there's a lot of things out of our control.
True, absolutely. I think somebody who tries to control a lot of things. um and I think often it is often sort of considered like a good thing. We use perfect as a phrase to sort of compliment people time and again. I think it's so ingrained in our vocabulary that it's we don't even consciously think of it. And people text me on WhatsApp and I respond with perfect, just as to end a conversation or to sort of compliment them. And I feel like when I was making this presentation, I realized that how unknowingly, unconsciously, I use perfect as something that's supposed to be good, and it's supposed to be something that as if it's a strength that you have. But perfectionism is can be very draining for somebody who's going through who's trying to sort of set these unrealistic standards. We set these really impossible standards for ourselves. We start equating our self-worth with achievement. We are often afraid to be judged. We are afraid to um, uh, take risks as well in our lives because of fear of failure. We often delay working on certain projects or certain tasks, or start with certain goals because we are extremely worried of judgment. And it can just end up making us feel like we're a failure. It creates a lot of stress for somebody who's going through it. So, perfectionism being a strength is often a misconception. It can be extremely debilitating for somebody who tries to be a perfectionist. In fact, we will be visiting this concept of perfectionism paralysis, where you are completely stuck and you're not able to make a decision or you're not able to move forward many a times. So, by the very definition of it, perfectionism is largely a self worth strategy. Perfectionism isn't about wanting to do things well. It's often about our own self worth, which is tied to performance, appearance, and control. And often the underlying belief is I'm not good enough if I don't do things flawlessly or perfectly. And this is not just a personality quirk or a trait, but it is often a coping mechanism um, that we learn very early on growing up because of whatsoever reason. And it often backfires in the long run. So, my question for you is, would you still think of perfectionism to be something that is something that's good, something that's, that's something that should be worn as a badge of honor? Um, or do you think it is something that is maybe holding us back somewhere? Maybe you can take a moment to reflect uh, if perfectionism is something that has supported your growth over the last few years, or it is something that stresses you out really.
I just think that it's pros and cons with that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because like perfectionism truly stems from trauma in a way. So it's like, for example, you want to be good at work. You want to do things correctly so errors don't happen, right? So that's a good thing about being a perfectionist, because that the mistakes won't happen, or all that stuff. But then in your personal life, to be a perfectionist, you're kind of, at some point you're degrading yourself when you don't, do the right thing, or you're not perfect in certain things. So it's like, it's pros and cons, I think. And first we need to find out, where does this mindset stem from. It has to come from some type of trauma, either growing up, being berated, being bullied or whatever. So there's many factors why someone in an adult life is a perfectionist, but there's pros and cons to that.
True, true, true. Absolutely agree. There are two sides to it for sure. And yes, there could be some healthy perfectionism at times, but then I think most of the time we end up treating it in a very maladaptive way as well. And that's what we're gonna look into now. So we're gonna differentiate between something called healthy striving and maladaptive perfectionism. So healthy striving is something that is inspired by growth. It's very growth oriented mindset. It's inspired by the values that you hold dearly. It comes out of curiosity. So that's the motivation behind healthy striving. Maladaptive perfectionism, on the other hand, is driven largely by fear and trauma. Like you said, um, in terms of healthy striving, we often set uh, flexible standards. We set realistic standards. We set really smart goals for ourselves. We also know when to stop. We know when to modify our goals, how to tweak our goals depending on the situation we are in. So we're able to look at the bigger picture often. When it comes to maladaptive perfectionism, it's often very rigid, this or nothing. It's often very unrealistic as well. Very we set really grand, unrealistic goals, which can be extremely difficult to achieve. Or the standards that we are trying to compare ourselves is extremely rigid, and again, we often fail to reach that, fueling the feeling of we are not good enough. Um, the self-talk, the internal dialogue that somebody who is engaging in maladaptive perfectionism as a strategy is going to be very critical, is going to be very harsh. Um, a lot of negative self-talk as compared to somebody. Uh, an example could be, oh, I'm a failure. Oh, I didn't do this right. I messed up. I failed. I'm not good enough. So that could be the internal dialogue of somebody who's a perfectionist. But when somebody is with this growth oriented mindset, they probably focus a lot on things that they've learned. Um, okay, I learned something new even if I didn't do it well. So of course, it's more encouraging. It's more constructive in nature. Again, somebody who is striving, who's healthy striving, adapts and learns. And so in maladaptive perfectionism, you often go into the spiral of shame. and guilt. The focus here is on progress and learning and not just outcomes as compared to maladaptive perfectionism. Emotionally, at emotional level, you're more resilient, you're more energized when you are striving for when you're striving in life, when you're striving for growth. But in terms of maladaptive perfectionism, you're anxious, you're exhausted, you're really, really drained out and burnt out. So I think this is what differentiates the two. We, of course, now we'll get into the perfectionism cycle. So the cycle shows how perfectionism can lead to avoidance, burnout, procrastination. It leads to so procrastination leads to self-criticism. We set really unrealistic standards. We feel anxious, we procrastinate, we are overworked, we feel overwhelmed. Then we feel ashamed, we feel shame, we feel guilt, and this again impacts our confidence levels, which basically fuels that perfectionism for perfectionist tendencies that we have, and the cycle just continues. um, and this cycle can go on for years and years, and you really you it's very difficult to take action sometimes. Sometimes it can leave you paralyzed, and hence you're using the word paralysis. So it's a vicious cycle that we often get stuck in. Mm, in fact, I wanted to sort of check with all of you if you feel like the cycle shows up in your life um, at some point, or if you've experienced something like this in the past.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we all have some type of fear of failing. I mean,
Mhm,
that's just human nature, right? But
mhm.
I think understanding where it stems from and work around it, and make sure that it doesn't turn into something more serious like OCD, or your relationship with other people and stuff like that. Because when you
Mhm.
turn into a perfectionist, you expect others to be like that, and you're going to not have successful relationship with people for sure.
That's true. I think this shows up a lot in relationships, and it impairs relationships a lot. Like you said, you would expect the same thing from the other person, and again, people often fail to meet those really high standards that you set. I think that's a wonderful example. Thank you so much for sharing. And this perfectionism paralysis cycle shows up a lot. Um, it shows up a lot in with respect to weight loss and weight management, and our whenever we're trying to sort of set certain wellness goals. And I've seen this so much in my clients. Like I think almost every second person comes up with this mindset where they want to do it extremely perfectly, and even if there's a small error, they sort of get stuck into this cycle. So uh, okay, so it often sort of, I think one of the most prevalent form of cognitive distortion or cognitive thinking that shows up in weight management is all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking is black and white thinking. We often think in terms of black and white. We sort of fail to see the gray. There's no middle ground here. Either it's this or that. Um, an example could be you are on a very rigid diet prescribed by the dietitian, and then you eat one cookie on a particular day, or you go out and you maybe there's a slip up. Maybe eat something which is not a part of your diet plan, and then you get into this feeling of, oh, I messed up, I failed, I'm good for nothing. So all those thoughts end up coming. Or maybe something came up and you missed your workout, and then you stop going to the gym altogether because you start feeling so bad about missing that one day of gym. um, and so I think this is something that shows up a lot with respect to weight management. um, it can also show up a lot in terms of overtraining sometimes. So it's not just messing up on your classes or completely stopping your diet, but it comes in terms of overdoing things sometimes. You're overtraining, you're spending hours in the gym, there's literally no recovery. And that again really leads to burnt out, there's chronic fatigue as a result of the training, the amount of load that you're training with. It again causes a lot of guilt, even after small slip ups. And like I said, we often give up entirely even after a single mistake. And that's why a lot of people, if you notice, have this pattern of, oh, I go to the gym once a year. Like they often sign up for the gym, they go for a year, for a month or so, and then they drop off completely for the next couple of months. And then somehow they start again, and then they like off gym again for the next 6 months. So that's how the cycles or can show up, or perfectionism and weight management can show up. Mm, to give you an analogy, it could feel like you are, this treadmill mouse. So this, I think, this metaphor very nicely captures how you're endlessly running, never feeling like it's enough. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you do, nothing feels satisfying. Um, and that's the trap of perfectionism. We never feel like it's enough. So I thought I'll just put this out here because it really captures uh, the essence of what perfectionism can look like for a lot of people. It's a constant drain in your energy.
Yeah, that's great. Like I was thinking when you were talking um about the slip up, like, oh well, I didn't do good this today or whatever, and it if you don't if you don't take care of that mindset, it could lead to like bulimia, it could lead to anorexia, where you're like, now I'm gonna throw up, now I'm gonna not eat because I'm gonna punish myself. It turns into like a punishment. And
Mm.
it leads to other serious issues like bulimia and anorexia. And so the relationship with food has to change, and also with yourself, and so that's important too. If you feel like you're a perfectionist and you're just punishing yourself because you ate a cookie today, and now you're gonna turn into like bulimic, and that could happen, and so that's where the danger comes in, and that's where you should definitely seek, a coach like yourself, to help you with that.
No, absolutely true. I think that's a wonderful point here. How relationship with our food. Again, we look at that from a very perfectionist mindset, and that can lead to certain disorders in the long run. So I think that's wonderful. Um, I Yeah. So we'll now sort of get into how, what how is perfectionism really impacting us? What is the hidden cost of perfectionism? Um, so it can impact us again mentally. So it impacts our mental health. So there's a mental health cost associated with it. There is physical health cost associated with it. Like someone said, it impacts our relationships because we become so rigid around our expectations. So it creates a lot of relationship strains, and of course, it impacts our overall quality of life, where sometimes in finding joy becomes extremely difficult. We'll get into all of this. So, in terms of mental health, its impact on mental health, it can lead to anxiety, burnout, overthinking, chronic stress, really low self worth, shame, etc. We've gone through the paralysis cycle, so all of those things show up when you are under a lot of when you're going through perfectionism, or you're focusing largely on perfectionism. In terms of physical health, yes, overtraining, overreaching. Really disordered habits, eating rigid eating habits, rigid diets, all of that can be a result of perfectionism. So and it really messes up, like we said, our relationship with food. It can create really disordered habits. In terms of relationship, obviously it impacts our expectations with others. We fear vulnerability. um, we really struggle with asking for help. Again, this is extremely common. So a lot of clients, even they struggle to ask for help or to reach out even to you as a coach, and they start feeling really they feel like, again, they've failed you instead of asking and reaching out for help. So that's there. And then in terms of life impact, of course, there's a lot of avoidance, risk avoidance. You don't take new challenges. We are not very spontaneous. We're not very creative. We Because we're holding ourselves back somewhere, and we fear starting out unless it's perfect. So we wait for the perfect moment to start, or I'll start this when things are great, or when things are going well, and so it basically prevents us from taking action in our lives. So this is how it can show up. I, in fact, want you to take a minute to now think, now that we know what perfectionism is, how it impacts us, and we know what is the cost of perfectionism. Um, can we just think about, what is it that you would do differently, or you would like to attempt if you didn't have to be, if you don't have to do it perfectly? Like if perfectionism wasn't holding you back, what would you go for?
So what would I go for if perfectionism wouldn't hold me back? That's the
Yeah.
question, right?
Yes, yes.
Wow, I gotta think about that one.
Take your time, take your time. Like I personally feel like I sometimes, again, how it can how what is it that I would do differently? I draw and paint sometimes, but I often don't post it on social media, or I don't, because again there's this fear of, what will people think of my paintings, etc. So maybe, I think personally for me, I might want to maybe put out things that I draw and paint on social media, just for the fun of it, and not to sort of, post it for external validation.
Right. I think that certain things, well, like for example, for me, like my brother and I, we want to post stuff on social media, like art stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things is with not so much me, but more like my brother, he won't post anything because it's not perfect. And so
Yeah.
he's been on this sitting on a lot of art that he could be posting because he's afraid that it's not perfect enough or because someone's going to comment something negative. And I always tell him, like, just let it go, just do you, because there's going to be probably more people that are going to like you versus people that are not going to like you. And
Yeah.
so it's like, don't hold yourself from being something great because you think that it's not perfect enough for the other person. And it's like, we're still working on it, and hopefully we this year will be the year. But yeah, definitely, like, just go with it, and know that any opinion out there is just an opinion, just like how we have opinions about other things, right?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so it's okay. It's okay for someone not to like you. It's okay for someone not to appreciate your art because someone else will. And versus one over 100, I mean, I'd rather be with the group of 100 that love me, right? Or just do it for them and for myself, especially for myself. And so I always tell them, listen, just do it. Just let's post things, let's put it out there. And if you can't look at the comments, I'll take care of it. I'll delete the comments or whatever, just so he could get out there. And so
Mhm.
that's one thing that we're working on. Another thing is, like, for me, if I eat something that I shouldn't eat on a day, I'll end up punishing myself the next day and I won't eat all day, right? Instead of just eating healthy, right? Um, I kind of like to punish myself, and that's something that I have to work on, because that's where the perfectionism comes
Mhm.
in. Like, I wasn't perfect today, so I'm gonna punish myself tomorrow, and it's like that's where I have to work on, for sure. And a lot of people, a lot of patients do have to work around or with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I think both these examples really fit here, and it's often it reflects what we really want, and what is basically and what's been stopping us all this while. So I'm glad that you've identified these areas, and I think it's time to maybe do some work around this as well. And of course, we'll be talking about now, as to what we can do from our side to be break free from perfectionism. But yeah, before that, this I found this image as well, which I thought could be helpful. So you basically, perfectionism at the surface level, it's like the tip of the iceberg. On the surface, you just see a tiny part of it, but then there's so much underneath in terms of burnout, fatigue, um, embarrassment, etc. So I thought I'll just share this picture because this can also be a very powerful metaphor for what how perfectionism shows up in our lives. We often don't realize how much it's impacting us unless it starts impacting us. Okay, so what do we do now? How do we break free from perfectionism? Um, how can we unlearn it? And I think this session today is of course going to help you take the very first steps. A lot of it might require, especially since a lot of it comes from our childhood trauma, might require us to work with a therapist, work with a coach, um, and see and help with, so that of course we can move from it. But yeah, I think to get you started on uh, how do we stop being a perfectionism, here are some suggestions that I have. uh, Number one, so again, we'll try to look at it from a cognitive point of view, behavioral point of view, and of course, we'll try to integrate that with a little bit of humanism as well. So when it comes to cognitive or mindset related tools, perfectionism again is often a result of our thinking, right? Um, so one thing to do is to notice and to catch ourselves thinking um, things like, if I don't do this perfectly, I've failed. So the first step here is to notice your thoughts. Okay, am I getting a thought? Am I getting a perfectionist thought that I'm feeling if I'm not doing this properly? Um, or if I don't get 15 likes on, or 100 likes on my post, am I failing at it? Am I not good enough? I'm not worthy of it. So that's the first thing that you do. And then you try to replace that with um, a little more balanced thought like, okay, I am learning, or I must, I'm sure I'm getting this right, or I'm trying my best, and maybe this is enough. So thoughts a little more balanced, a little less negative thought. So you're basically trying to reframe your thinking. um, you're reframing, yeah, what's the negative thought, negative talk that you have. So we're trying to think in terms of gray and not black and white. We're trying to look at the bigger picture. And also, perfectionists tend to look in extremes. Um, so that's the black and white thinking. Um, so if either it's total success or a total disaster or a total failure. So we try to um, practice this flexibility in our thinking as well. So seeing mistakes as a learning opportunity and not as if we fail. So maybe thinking on these lines can at least help you get started. And of course, if there's more work that we need to do, then this can be done with the help of a coach or a counselor. Then again, changing our habits. So certain behavioral tools can be very helpful here. One is setting good enough goals. So uh, it's not just about smart goals, but it is about not setting those unrealistic, perfect, so-called perfect goals. We're trying to go for good enough goals. Okay. Um, Again, this is not setting the bar too low. It's just setting bar that's a little more achievable. Okay, not perfect, achievable and good enough. Okay, then we try to do things imperfectly. In fact, we challenge ourselves. We put ourselves in situations where we are forced to sort of face our perfectionist mindset. um, so you start doing things imperfectly on purpose. You start in a graded manner. Okay, maybe if I'm afraid of showing my art to somebody, I might start by showing it to a close friend. Hey, do you like this? Or showing it to a family member, and then maybe showing it to a bunch of friends, and then maybe then the extended family, then maybe putting on social media. So we're trying to expose ourselves um, um, to the perfectionist tendencies in a much more graded manner. And then lastly, obviously, it's about um, celebrating the effort that we are putting. So, and not just celebrating the outcomes, whether did I get 100 likes or not, but celebrating the effort, celebrating the journey, the process. I think that is what can really help us change our mindset around perfectionism. So taking one step at a time, basically. And then self compassion or kindness. I feel personally that self compassion is one of the most powerful tools um, for perfectionism. Self compassion means treating yourself with kindness, especially even when things aren't, uh, you know, going as per your expectations, or even if you think you're making mistakes. Um, um, there's a psychologist named Christian Neff, and he has a three-part approach to self-compassion. So that's basically what you see on your screen right now. He talks of um, he talks about self-compassion, self-kindness instead of self-criticism. So you treat yourself like you would treat a friend. Okay, so that's one way of approaching kindness towards yourself. The other is recognizing that you're not alone. Okay, often in situations like this, we often feel like, oh, I'm struggling. I'm the only one who's going through this, but everybody struggles. So recognizing that you're not alone and you can always reach out for help is what Neff talks about. And the third is to notice your feelings without actually judging them. So being mindful about your feelings instead of getting stuck in them. Mm. When perfectionism says that, hey, you're not good enough, you uh, you're not good enough, then you try to sort of think from a more compassionate point of view that, okay, I'm doing my best. So again, you're able to reframe the thoughts. So that's where the self-kindness and the self-compassion would kick in. um, okay, so yeah, these are some basic strategies to help you get started, um, and then can help you work on the perfectionist tendencies that all of us have. Um, Now we have this quick exercise. Um, so basically, again, either you can make a note of it, or you can maybe just think in your mind or write it on a paper. Um, it's basically it's basically a permission giving, permission slip exercise. This often helps us reduce the shame that we have. It can help us build self compassion. So maybe just thinking about, maybe for now, if you don't want to write it down, maybe just thinking about what is that, you know, one thing. In fact, we can start with one thing. There can be multiple things that you might have on your mind, but can we write ourselves a permission slip to do something that we want to? Okay. Um, so maybe it's like making a resolution right now. Hmm. Again, to help you get started on thinking about this. Um, so can I give myself permission? For example, can I give myself permission to rest without feeling guilty? Can I give myself permission to eat in a more balanced way without over dieting or over exercising? Mm. Um, can I yeah, so yeah, if you want to share, if you have something on your mind, we can hear that out as well.
It's funny that you mentioned I give myself permission to rest without guilt because I feel like I have this negative thought about napping. And sometimes you need a nap. Sometimes you have to take a moment to nap, but because of my traumas and stuff like that, I don't see nap as a good thing. So I feel like, but it's a healthy thing in a way, you know? So I feel like I have to tell myself that I give myself permission to rest without guilt for sure. It's funny that you put that there because it's like, oh, wait, that's how I feel sometimes. You know, I feel like I'm always like, oh, I gotta be busy. I gotta be busy, you know? But sometimes I need to rest my mind and it's okay to take a nap during the day sometimes, you know? But I never do. I never do because I have this negative feeling towards that, you know? And it's just it has to be in a healthy way, you know. Napping all day is not good, but 20-30 minutes is okay, you know, to rest your mind, especially when you're busy and stuff. So for sure, one of the exercises that I do a lot too, in regards to like self-worth and self-validation, is
Mm-hmm.
that I look at myself in the mirror and I talk to myself, you know, let's have a conversation with yourself, you know, because love yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. Oh, it's okay to do this. It's okay. I'm human. You know what I mean? So it's like I do those type of exercises sometimes when I feel overwhelmed or overstimulated about something, and I feel down. And I look at myself in the mirror and I'll be like, I'm worthy. I'm loved. I have a tremendous support around me. Let me focus on that. And so I do that. I do these exercises and it helps me a lot. Breathing exercises help me a lot. But yeah, definitely I'm gonna take into account that I give myself permission to rest without guilt for sure.
Yeah, yeah, you can write those slips to yourself. In fact, you can write it physically and give it to yourself. That okay, I'm giving myself this permission. But again, thanks for sharing. I think I really like the strategy that you use to sort of build your self worth. I think that really works out really well. Cool. So again, for the rest of us, we can just think on this line and maybe start building upon this. Um, so we're almost done with the presentation today. I wanted to sort of talk about the takeaway, or if there was one takeaway that you should have. But again, people can have different takeaways. Maybe for somebody it's perfectionism paralysis cycle, and maybe somebody it's the permission slip. So we can have different takeaways from this call. What Again, this is another nudge here. So one could be focusing a lot more on consistency rather than intensity. So often consistency, if you look at this picture here, um, um, you go really far when you're focusing on consistency, right? But if you're only focusing on intensity, it's always going to be very short term or short lived. So again, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Fitness, weight loss, health, focusing on your health is a long term strategy, and hence it's going to take a while. So consistency is a key. Perfectionism makes us focus a lot more on intensity rather than consistency. So something to maybe think about and take away from today's call. And again, lastly, we often overuse this, but I think this is, again, one of my favorite quotations of progress over perfectionism. Right? So you try to focus a lot on the progress and the small journey and the smaller steps that you're taking rather than just focusing on the outcome. Um, so yeah, I think these could be some of your takeaways of putting those small steady efforts, rather than working on extremes and burning ourselves out. So yeah, thank you for being so patient with me and being here in the session. Do we have any questions, anything that's come to your mind?
Thank you so much. I'm gonna show my brother the video for sure. He needs to hear this.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much.
A great talk, Nihit. That was really excellent talk. I think that this is very, um, this a lot of our patients that we take care of deal with a lot of these things, and what I've noticed is that when we start talking to people about some of these things, sometimes the light bulb goes off. They haven't had anybody talk to them about this before. It's like you're living in a house of mirrors, and sometimes people just need someone to say, "Hey, here's how you can break the cycle, whether it's that perfectionism paralysis cycle or all these little things. I think are incredibly important. So great talk. We're going to obviously put this up. We've recorded this, and we're going to share this with our patients. So
Hola,
Thank you
muy
for the
bien, usted.
feedback. Do we have any more questions? Anything?
Hola.
See, hi. Uh,
Hello.
I hope I don't butchered your name, Nihit, right?
Yes, yes, it's
So, everything you said was resonated a lot with me and my family. I thought that many of our tendencies of being perfectionists came from the the way we were raised and the demands from our parents. Obviously, without bad intentions, right? They wanted us to be um, good to achieve professions and uh, to be successful in life, but that came with a high price. And my brother, my sister, and I, we all see the margin of error in our life so narrow, um, before we fall into the point of feeling that we're disappointing our parents, and that was all our lives, and that is not healthy at all. I feel like it would have been probably better, although maybe more difficult, to make mistakes when we should have. And yeah, we have to be more gentle with ourselves. And one thing that got my attention, I use an app with positive affirmation quotes
Hmm.
that I read every day, a minimum of 5 or 6. And one of them got my attention. It says something like, I'm working towards achieving a perfect version of me, and I totally disagree with that.
Hmm.
I don't think that's my goal, and it will never be my goal. I'm not trying to be perfect, because perfect had created an enormous amount of anxiety, because I always want to please others. I don't want to make anybody mad. I don't want to be the conflicted person at work or at home. And that need for approval from everybody, always trying to please people, created this horrible depression and anxiety spiral that is hard to control. But obviously, our parents didn't know better. They did what they thought it was good for us. But making mistakes can be healthy sometimes too. And understanding that achieving the perfect you should not be the goal. At least it's not for me. And thank you so much for everything.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's really profound. And yeah,
Thank
like I think
you.
all we need to do is be a little more kind with ourselves.
I think you have to be the best for I think one of my things that I always tell myself, just be the best version of yourself. I think the word perfection wouldn't be, it would just be the best person, the best version of yourself. And that's just in a positive way, not in a negative way, I think, you know. I feel like it's just you should just always strive to be the best version of yourself. We only have one life to live, you know. And let's do what we can, but the best version, ultimately, I think. That's what I go by.
Great, great mantra to live by. Best version over perfect version. Awesome.
Thank you so
So,
much.
thank you so much. I think we're done for today then. If something comes up, feel free to reach out. You have my email ID. I'll probably put it in my chat as well. Or again, you can reach out to the customer support at LeanDreams and they'll get back to you.
Thank you so much. We have a great team
Thank
here. So,
you.
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
night.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you. You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.